Yeah, well, let's get started. Everyone else can catch up, I guess, on the podcast or the recording later. So yeah, I'll just say thanks again for tuning in on this week's You Heard. I think this week we're wanting to cover some of the lingo and terms of V3 and stuff like that. So before we dive in, I'll just give everyone a chance to say hi quickly. Over to Mister.
Thank you, Bobby. Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining this week. Good to see you all. As usual, we had a good crowd. Yeah, thanks.
Yep. Hey, happy Friday, guys. Glad to see a nice audience here.
Happy Friday. Happy to see you here.
Happy Friday, y'all.
Cool. Thanks, guys. So yeah, V2 to V3 is a pretty big shift, and we just want to, I guess, talk about some of the concepts or the terminology that is in there. It's fairly complex, some of the stuff, and it's really hard to get your head around. Of course, it took me, of course, a couple of times as well. So it's no wonder there's some confusion or people want some clarification, and we're of course here to provide that for people. So again, I want to remind people that although it is like a bit more complex, there are some more complex features. People can still simply stake their yAxis tokens and earn more yAxis if they want to. You don't have to go any deeper than that. But we do have the option to participate more through the locking mechanism and yAxis, which is where most of the complexity comes in. So again, that's not mandatory, but it can lead to more rewards. So it is good to be informed on these kind of things. We published an article a couple of days ago with a list of the different terms that we're going to go with, which is a slight change to the curve. We're trying to, although it has a lot of the same ideas, we're trying to just make the terms a bit more friendly, I guess, because the curve stuff is really hard. Even if you read through the documents and you watch the videos, it's still kind of hard to get. So we're trying to just streamline that a little bit, as well as giving people an overview of the main three features that we have, which are depositing into the vaults, locking and boosting, and then voting on the rewards distribution. So there's two types of returns that you can get on the platform now. So when we talk about yield, that's now going to be the base strategy that's coming. For example, the convex mempool and the APY which you're getting from there. And then when we talk about rewards, rewards is strictly about yAxis that we sprinkle on top. So the yield is the base strategy and rewards is yAxis. So everyone gets the same amount of base yield in the vaults, but the rewards in yAxis going to people on top, they vary between a minimum and a maximum amount, and that can be influenced by the holders of yAxis. So remember, you can get yAxis by locking yAxis. That's what you get in return. So the longer you choose to lock for, the more yAxis you'll get for each of your yAxis tokens. And then we can influence the yAxis rewards that you're getting in two different ways. So firstly, at a high level, the yAxis rewards are distributed more to the vaults that have been voted for by the yAxis holders, by the lockers. And that distribution creates your minimum and maximum APY, which we'll see on the vaults. So the minimum and maximum changes depending on the vote made by those lockers, by those yAxis lockers. So with the max rewards, it's always 2.5 times that of the minimum amount of rewards APY. Then secondly, on a personal level, what determines whether you get to the minimum or the maximum of that range is down to your personal boost multiplier, and that is between 1x and 2.5x. So to increase your boost multiplier, you have to start locking in your yAxis tokens in order to hold yAxis. And that also needs to be topped up every once in a while to maintain your maximum boost level if you so wish. So to recap, the strategy base yield is the same for all vault users, regardless of how much you deposit. But the yAxis rewards that are sprinkled on top have a minimum and a maximum for each vault, which is decided by the vote. And what determines whether you personally get the minimum or the maximum is your boost multiplier. And then what determines your boost multiplier is the number and duration of yAxis that you locked into the platform. So we're also going to provide a handy calculator, which allows you to judge how much locked yAxis you need to get in order to have your maximum 2.5 boost applied to your account. And when you have that boost applied, it applies to all of your different vaults. It's not just to one. So it's like an account-wide thing for yourself. Also, top tip, just or maybe an FYI, your boost multiplier doesn't take effect until you actually make an action on the platform. So when you claim rewards or you add or withdraw liquidity, it's those acts which are called a checkpoint in the contracts, and that checkpoint then updates your account and then applies the new boost multiplier to your wallet. So we wrote a lot more detail in the article, and if you haven't got around to it yet, we certainly recommend just having a read through and thinking about the terms and how it kind of works. I think Mr. also made a few nice graphics on there just to kind of get your head around the flow of funds, I guess, of each of those three main features. So that's a little intro, I guess, on the terminology and the concepts, I guess. I'll just talk a little bit about the V3 launch. So the C4 audit report should be released either at the end of today or it's going to be on Monday. We're just talking about the finer points of the report just to make sure that it's accurate with the C4 guys. Most of the issues that we got, again, they were relating to having multiple tokens in the same vault, like, for example, having DAI, USDC, and Tether in the same vault. So that was creating different chances for arbitrage or slippage. And just to confirm to everyone, that's been changed. So those arbitrage and slippage opportunities aren't possible anymore. So the last PR that we've been working on, that got some comments on kind of Monday time or Sunday, that will be finished up today. Then the team on the mods, we've been going through the QA and doing some testing this week on the front end. So that's just to create a list of things for the devs to hook up, things maybe they forgot or missed or aren't quite right. Stuff that isn't like big to fix and should be very quick for us to resolve. So after we push the contracts on the back end, we'll then wait a few days. It will take a few days for the rewards to start flowing. And that's like a nice chance for everyone to unstake or restake or swap into your required tokens and position yourselves ready for when the rewards do start, to make sure that it's like a fair launch, so no one has a head start essentially on the yAxis rewards. So for both security and convenience reasons, we're making the vaults accept also the specific strategy token, which is being farmed. So for example, a big target audience are the current Convex users. We're going with some strategies at launch which are farming Convex. And Convex has got almost $15 billion TVL right now. Yeah, it's like the biggest right now. So that's really like a huge audience for us to try and attract those users across to us, so that we can do auto compounding for them. So to help them onboard to yAxis, we don't want them to have to go through the entire process where, imagine if you use Convex yourself, you'd have to unstake, you'd have to withdraw, to unwrap, and which is quite costly in itself, and then to go back through the whole process with yAxis to onboard, and that's going to be really expensive. So that's something that we want to try and avoid. So to help people do that, we will enable them to, for example, in the Convex MIM pool for our USD vaults, which has got 2.5 billion itself in it, we will enable them to deposit the MIM curve tokens, which they already have, straight into our vault. So that both helps them on the user experience side, and it also helps on the security side to prevent any kind of slippage issues or any arbitrage opportunities, because the token being used in the strategy is exactly the same as the token being deposited into the vault. So yeah, at launch, just to confirm the initial strategies that we have for USD, we're farming the MIM pool on Convex, Magic Internet Money. And for Link, we're farming just the Link pool on Convex. There's not a lot of choice there. For ETH, we're farming the ALETH pool, which is from Alchemix. And then for Bitcoin, we're farming the REN BTC pool as well on Convex. There's a few options actually for BTC. We went for REN just because it's more established and maybe a little bit safer. There is one which is gives you a few extra points on your yield, but we thought maybe it's just a little bit safer to go with a more established pool, which is why we're going with REN. So the plan is, once the DAO is set up as well, which we're going to be establishing through the era, and it's capable of handling the responsibility of managing a portfolio of the users, essentially, we can then migrate the funds over to an upgraded vault, which will then be a true kind of 7-figure experience, which the DAO will be able to manage properly and allocate different amounts to different strategies. So overall, on the development side, I'd say that all the hard work is now done. It's beyond us. It's just a matter now of polishing up the front end, which we're working now to do amongst the mods and the testers and the front end. and then we'll be ready for launch. So yeah, it's been a hell of a slog to get here, and it's really nice to have the hard stuff ticked off. So yeah, it's really close now. So yeah, looking forward to that very much. Yeah, so I guess onto the community section, or maybe Big Pappy has something to share.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Bobby. That was a lot of good information. And like I put in the chat, I do highly recommend that everyone reads the article that the team put together. If you're a smooth brain like myself, it's really helpful because some of this curve convex stuff can be pretty complicated. Just one admin note. So for those that joined us on game night, I really appreciate it. We had a lot of fun. I got killed over and over on Among Us. We are going to be doing these weekly, and we're actually going to be adding a role to the server to make it a little easier to organize. So if you want to join us for game nights or you want to organize your own, reach out to Ahmad. We'll add the gaming tag to your profile. That said, we'll move into the community questions for this week's Y'all Heard. So Bobby, the first one's from Echo Patient, and he was asking about the LP tokens and whether or not there's a restock date, and if you had any more information on that.
Yeah, so we are planning to restock. Like I said, if we do go ahead with Olympus Pro, then it's just too quick to end the LP rewards right now. So we would be restocking the LP, the Uniswap rewards. So that would run for another 3 months at least. So we don't have to wait until the day it runs out. We can top that up earlier and just restart the 90-day timer, which it has on it currently. So yeah, we're going to do that. Just to give people a chance to actually transition from the LP to Olympus Pro. Again, if we do that, that's not a certainty yet. So yes is the answer.
Right. And speaking of Olympus, so we got quite a few questions, and Abu, I know you gave me 2 sets of questions. I'm going to start with the Olympus stuff, and then if we have time, the other items I think which are very interesting, but a little bit less technical and a little bit less related to the project specifically. We'll get into those last. So the first one is regarding the benefits of going with Ohm. Abu was asking if you could elaborate, and if it's a little bit too much, it's real up to you. But what's the benefit to first the one-sided stakers, to LP participants, and to vault users?
Right, so it really just affects the LP users. For everyone else, it doesn't really affect them. It's essentially what they're doing is allowing a platform to buy back their own liquidity. So like you all know, we use Uniswap at the moment, and most DeFi platforms use a DEX. And if you don't have a central exchange like Binance, for example, you need to provide permissions to those to Uniswap, for example, to get people to go in there and provide liquidity, and that makes the token tradable. The problem is that long term, if you don't have a central exchange, you need to provide those tokens forever. So you can imagine over, say, 5 or 10 years, that's a hell of a lot of tokens you need to invest. And we all complain about the cost of a listing on something like Binance. You're talking like $1 million to list on something like that, on a tier 1 exchange. And people complain, they say like, wow, that's so much money. But you need to imagine that we're spending 250,000 tokens every quarter, which is today's price about $1 million every quarter, just to incentivize our own Uniswap pool. So that's something which just isn't sustainable. So it's something that we'd rather own those tokens ourselves. So what it does essentially is that it allows people to buy a discounted yAxis token in return, and how they pay for it is by paying with their LP token. So there's a marketplace on their own website, and you essentially can buy yAxis tokens at a small discount price, just a small one, and in return for handing in your LP token. So that means that we're going to, out of the treasury, be allocating yAxis tokens that we have that we would otherwise be continually having to throw at Uniswap. And instead of doing that, we'll give them to directly the users who own the LP, and we will now own these LP tokens. So that means that the token will remain tradable forever. And because we're the platform ourselves, we don't care about having to farm yAxis tokens ourselves to be incentivized, right? We're just going to hold on to those LP tokens and essentially, and it's kind of, because we're not going to trade in and out of the position, the impermanent loss doesn't really matter to us. It's not a factor to us because we're not cashing in the position, right? We're not ever going to realize that impermanent loss. So for us, it's a chance to safeguard the future, really, and it's definitely a future-looking program. It's not something which has like a radical effect to any token holders right now. It just allows people who are going to enjoy the LP rewards over the next 3 months an opportunity to trade in that LP token for a discounted yAxis token, essentially.
Oh, thanks, Bobby. Yeah, I think the Ohm stuff is really exciting. I'm really looking forward to the discussions that are come out of this. Looking at the second question, so now this one's a little bit less technical, like I said, but I do appreciate this, Abu. Sometimes it's nice to take a step back and look at the bigger space, right? So Abu's question is, the evolution of DeFi has been insanely rapid. We've been very focused on the end goal of V3, yes. But taking a step back and looking at the evolving landscape, what have you seen or learned that makes you, and then he asked 4 questions here. First one is, what looking at the landscape, what makes you want to stay the course within DeFi, within this project?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. DeFi is a rapidly evolving space. I think what makes me want to stay in personally is that there's so many people, as well as capital, coming into DeFi all the time. People that were working traditional jobs, and actually, I had someone yesterday message me and ask, how he can get into DeFi. He's in the traditional world and all this kind of stuff, and wondering how to break into it. And I think there's so many people looking to get into it. As well as invest in DeFi as well. I mean, me as an expat for myself, whenever I try and use banks now, it's an absolute pain in the butt because they're constantly freezing transactions, sending things internationally, or putting charges on top of it. And DeFi is way better. Of course, Ethereum fees are a bit sucky right now, but the concept is definitely there, and things are improving all the time. And an example of that is Olympus Pro. I mean, there was this huge problem in the space of providing liquidity, decentralized liquidity. And that was something which everyone was going to face a huge crunch in the future once their missions ran out. And the Olympus Pro project, it is an example of how DeFi is evolving to solve these bigger problems. And because there's so much brain power and financial backing coming into the space, I'm very confident of the way it's heading. And then, conversely, I'm not really confident in the way that traditional financial services are progressing. I think with the way that interest rates are against rising inflation as well, it's just a losing game in the long run. So I think we're definitely on the right side of history here by joining into DeFi.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree, Bobby. I think when I think of it personally for myself, it's the barriers that DeFi tears down and the access to services that we're this traditional finance. 99.9% of us would not have access to these kind of investment options with these kind of returns. It just wouldn't happen, right? The banks and traditional finance have had generations to build walls around the best part of investing, and DeFi is kind of systematically reshaping that entire notion and bringing it to retail, to normal people like us. I think that's exciting. For me, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, and things are being revised all the time or refined, and tokenomics is another really key part of that. Like I've talked about several times. It was a very experimental space when DeFi kind of kicked off last summer, and a lot of tokenomics didn't work out, and people have to keep on moving with the times. But what is great about is that some models have emerged successful, like they do kind of work, and they've got the psychology right behind it. And what's really nice about working in DeFi is that we kind of make the rules. Like we can do anything we want as a DAO. We control the tokenomics, so we can actually change something if it doesn't work, rather than being like, founding a business and maybe the business doesn't work and it just fails. Like we have the chance to actually just change and do things differently, and that's what's really nice about it. We can do anything we like.
Yeah, and that actually leads to the next question here, which is, again, looking at the space, what within it makes you want to pivot and add other functionality? And I know we already kind of have touched on a lot of this. When I'm thinking, the first thing that comes to my mind is like layer two, but also the type of investing that we're doing, the OHM stuff and other stuff you're talking about. But for you personally, I mean, what's the other kind of functionality that you'd like to bring into the space? Just seeing the what's going on in the broader DeFi world.
Yeah, I mean, what our kind of original vision, I think, is still something which is new and is a value add in the space, where you have a diversified portfolio being managed by someone else. It's easy for us to be in this little echo chamber and think that it's all very easy and anyone can get involved, but it's really not. I mean, if you talk to anyone from maybe the next generation, I mean, the older generation, I mean to say, it's very, very confusing to them, and they certainly would never get involved. So trying to make that stuff as easy as possible for them to still have a diversified portfolio, because the idea of someone investing their pension or aping their pension fund into some random project, right, by an anonymous team is very scary, and they would never do that. So I think having these kind of quasi DAOs where they're like almost like semi-legal, or there's kind of middlemen which are playing that part. I think that's a key area where things would evolve, and I think with our approach long term, I think hopefully that should be the right approach as well, in order to really onboard like a lot of capital other than just crypto speculators. The ultimate goal is to onboard treasuries or bank accounts from large companies. In the same way that we've seen some countries looking to adopt crypto as well. I think imagine if, for example, El Salvador wants to actually start farming with their Bitcoin, for example. I think that's the kind of space where we can get to in the future, and we need to make sure those things are developing over time. So yeah, that's one area that I'd love to see us personally contribute to in the future.
Thanks, Bobby. So we have two more questions, and I think we have time for them. So we'll keep going here. Now, looking at the space, the next question: what worries you the most about DeFi?
Yeah, I mean, there are some problems of DeFi, of course. I mean, security is a big one. There's constantly exploits happening all the time. And yes, for example, building new code is really hazardous, and that's something that we've felt as well. It's taken a long time to get an original code base up and get it secure and be audited and all this kind of stuff. And that's made it, and that's led to a lot of frustration from the community. So my take for me now is that it would have been a hell of a lot easier to just fork some code and do a new project. And that's actually bad for the space in general, because it means that there's a lack of innovation happening. It's much easier for founders or teams to just take code and just repackage it essentially, right? Rather than actually add any innovation. And we need to make sure that people that are actually innovating in the space are kind of backed and supported and not shot down because they haven't released a product within a month kind of thing. So I think as a whole, crypto has become very, very impatient during this bull run to make money like immediately. You can't wait for it. It has to be now, and that's really hard in the technology space to innovate safely. And unfortunately, we've seen so many hacks because of it. There are other problems like I think I've talked about before, things like Curve. Like a lot of DeFi is based on Curve, right, at the moment, and Curve emissions will eventually run out. So I don't think that's going to be an issue, because I think that someone else will do something about that. But it's just things like that which are kind of on the horizon, and I'm sure that the community as a whole is able to overcome these things, either by Curve voting to extend their own emissions, or there being another Curve pop up and kind of be the replacement to that, or other concepts essentially. So I think there's so many people in the space that are innovating all the time, that are far smarter than me and are able to kind of solve these bigger problems before they really impact people.
Yeah, I would agree, Bobby. And the other thing you touched on earlier in the last question, which is the legality aspect. I don't see it as a issue right now, right? But there's always that unknown of, well, what kind of legislation could come out of say the G20 nations that might impact DeFi, that might impact crypto at large. There's still a lot of unknowns there, and I think I think we're taking a very cautious course, right? There's certainly much riskier investment options within crypto that'll definitely come under legislators, auditors, under questionable legal areas. But it's still something that I think in the coming years, I'm really curious to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think the answer is just to stay decentralized, so they just can't possibly tackle people. We've seen, for example, as soon as Coinbase now listed, they turn themselves into a huge target. Even though they've done everything that they can to comply with the regulations, they immediately put a target on their back. So regulators are able to go after obvious targets like that, but they're not able to go after individuals, and that makes it very, very hard for them to actually do. So I think, trying to stay decentralized and not actually have legal entities that anyone can easily target, I think is a really crucial thing to protect yourselves. But I mean, there's talk in the future about regulations over stable coins and stuff like this, and how that's going to affect, or if they're going to mandate KYC requirements on people that hold these kind of coins. But yeah, I mean, and we see some things already, like it's hard for some US traders to onboard crypto, or they have to pay taxes, or things like this. Or for example, USDC, it's a major stable coin, of course, but that's not tradable in a lot of other countries. So there are some little restrictions, but they're coming through other companies like Coinbase. So that's really where the leverage is over us, the users. It's through those central organizations. And I think that the rise of the DAO in general is really important to that, to make sure that government can't use these levers over us like they're doing on Coinbase right now. So if we manage to really evolve what a DAO can do and how a DAO can operate with each other, which requires a lot of work on things like digital identities and things like that, and different credentials to make sure you know who you're doing business with online, but anonymously. If we can do that and evolve that technology so that you don't need any sort of legal entity whatsoever, then it's going to be next to impossible for governments to actually impose any sort of lasting regulations, because it's going to apply to every single user on the planet rather than a handful of big companies.
Yeah, you're right. And then there's still some interesting developments, though, when you talk about having a legal entity representing a DAO. And I'm not saying that this is or isn't something that we'll look at in the future, right? But you and I have talked before about how there's a U.S. state, Wyoming, that stood up a legal concept of what a DAO is, and you can actually stand up an LLC through Wyoming for a DAO. I don't, I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand all the technical legal implications of doing so, but that at least is an interesting evolution within the space, in that a U.S. state government has recognized the value of a decentralized autonomous organization and wants to kind of enable it within a legal infrastructure. Even if we think that may not be a good thing for the space, right? I still think that's pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, and crypto itself is becoming such a large, lucrative sector that everyone wants a part of it. So, for example, as a lobby power, we're seeing crypto being able to actually start to lobby government themselves. We're seeing politically a lot of people, such as I saw the mayor of New York is saying he wants to take the first 3 payments in Bitcoin and things like that. And there's many politicians that are really trying to appease voters in order just to win the vote, right? So I think that there's such a swell of support for crypto amongst the younger generations, and that's just going to increase as the population gets older, essentially, and as new generations are born. So I think it's inevitable that, just like El Salvador, where they have a leadership which is really backing crypto or Bitcoin specifically, it's inevitable that many other, whether it's a state or a government or a royal family, really gets behind and wants to accept this. Whether it's DAO or whether it's a legal tender or whatever, I think it's inevitable that it's going to happen. It's just going to take a little bit of time, people just to survive until they get to that point. Although we all want to innovate in the space, we also don't want to put our heads above the parapet too much and be the one that goes to jail for it, and take the rap for everybody else.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that, Bobby. So that brings us to the last question, and this one, I like this one because I always, me personally, I always want my time in the crypto space to be a very positive one. It can be so stressful I know everyone on the call is thinking the same thing, which is, it's a very emotional investment. I think very wholly unique from a lot of other things because just the sheer volatility of crypto, it can really do a number on you. But Abu's last question is, what about DeFi or what within the space have you seen that makes you happy?
Yeah, what makes me happy in this space? Yeah, I mean, I've talked a little bit about what makes me happy, I'm excited about, but just to go back originally about how people are worried sometimes and people are scared, and I get that feeling myself, on some of my own personal stuff, which is yield farming or whatever somewhere else. And what I do every morning is I wake up and I go and just check, make sure nothing's happened, nothing's gone wrong. I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way, and that's like not a nice feeling to have. It means it's really hard for people to kind of check out the space because deep down that your funds aren't 100% safe and that something could happen. So I think generally like the education around security needs to improve to make sure that people are really taking it seriously, because that is one major barrier to adoption of normal people, of the mum and dad accounts and the pension accounts. It's having that safety to make sure nothing's actually going to happen. So yeah, what makes me happy in this space? Um, Yeah, I mean, lots of stuff. I mean, I love the people in the space. It's really nice that so many people are so enthusiastic about it. And I think that the space is evolving to not be so volatile. So it's not going to be so much boom and bust cycles. I think those cycles are going to flatten out basically as time goes on and as the market matures. So I think everything is very positive. I think the big thing that's changed, I think, this cycle is that people now so much they can see that there's not going to be maybe a multi-year bear market coming up. They can kind of see that that support is there and that there's so many people in the space now that it's not just going to disappear. Like people aren't just going to go off and do something else for a couple of years and then come back. And although there might well be a correction in the markets and things might go quiet for a little bit of time, there's so much activity in the space that I think that's going to come back, and that's a really nice thing to see and something that makes me happy to see. So I think that crypto is well on its way to securing a future for itself rather than being just a fad where people made some money one time.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Bobby. That's actually one of the things that makes me happy is seeing this evolution, this cycle, the trust that a lot of investors and a lot of new investors that they're putting into crypto. You would have never seen in cycles before this. Things like Curve, convex locking up your coins for a year or more. I mean, that's completely mind blowing that people trust the space that much now and what that says about where we're going. It's really exciting. I mean, it's only up from here. I mean, maybe there's going to be, like you said, there's going to be some bumps along the way. I'm sure the price will drop. There'll be corrections. That's normal. But overall, I mean, crypto as a space is only going to be going up from here. Um, so that's it for the questions that we had from the community. Thank you, Abu. I know some of those later ones weren't so technical, but I think it's good to remember, that there's more to this space than just the money. There's so much more, and I love these kind of questions, this kind of dialogue. So, anyways, thank you, everyone, and back to you, Bobby.
Okay, yeah, I'll just say thanks again for everyone joining this week. Yeah, we've got a busy weekend ahead of us. We'll finish up everything, and yeah, we'll be launching very soon. Thanks so much again. I'll hand off to Mr. and the DJ stuff.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks everyone for joining. Enjoy the music while we roll out. See you next week.